Hello there, my name is Brian Cook. I'm the District Instructional Technology and Innovation Coach for Worcester County Public Schools in Maryland. As a former middle school language arts teacher and Fulbright TGC recipient, I spent a lot of my early years in the classroom focusing on how to teach standards like theme in literature by asking students to regurgitate my ideas and thoughts to satisfy my beliefs. It wasn't until I participated in a global reading project that I realized my teaching was falling short of what my students needed. The project was asking kids to investigate one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, gender and racial equality. I wasn't sure my sixth grade students were mature enough for the topic, but they amazed me by their ability to find empathy towards the characters, and they wanted to support people, like in the book, all over the world. That day, I started to look at literature from a larger lens. I started to look at it from a global lens. I want to share one specific example from my classroom when we were reading the novel Refugee by Alan Gratz. It's a novel that's told through three refugee children who were forced to leave their homes due to different types of violence and persecution. We started by looking at our core values and unknown bias. It showed students where they got their beliefs toward immigration, immigrants, and refugees as it pertained to the novel. Now, in the midst of the study, politicians in Washington, D.C. were debating this thing called DACA, Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, giving students some background on the topic of immigrants from maybe local news or either parents' discussions around the kitchen table. I would constantly ask three reflection questions after some of our deepest discussions I probably ever had with middle schoolers. And the first question was real simple. Why might this matter to me? My second reflection was, why might this matter to the people around me? And finally, my third big reflection question was, why might this matter to the world? Now, students were thirsting for knowledge because their peer responses and thoughts were challenging the way of thinking that they previously knew. It was challenging their beliefs. They didn't know what to do, but they knew they needed more research because their questions weren't being answered. We decided to do mystery Skypes with other classes in some of the adjacent countries from the novel. My students asked those students about their views of immigration, what a refugee looks like, violent governments, and wow, my kids had to get their questions answered, and they did. We even found a nonprofit in our own state that supported refugees coming into America. They were willing to share about their experiences working with immigrants who claimed asylum. Now, we often heard about similar setbacks of real people that actually mimic the characters in the refugee novel. My students continued to find empathy for immigrant students of their own age and struggled with the unnecessary violence occurring around the world today. Now, as we finished it up, instead of writing the traditional analysis essay, I challenged my students to take a stance on the topic, and I assured them I would respect their beliefs and what I like to call the call to action assignments. Students used our green screen to create public service announcements, and we shared them out to the world on Flipgrid. Other students wrote opinion editorials for our class blog, and some took it a step further by asking their parents to submit their writing to our local newspaper. A handful were even published with positive and sometimes even negative comments. Now, I was able to take a novel and make it meaningful for middle school students. They got to ask tough questions toward one another while realizing a great truth. Not all people believe in the same things as they do. We had many stumbling blocks in our small group conversations, but it always brought us to personal growth. Allowing students to engage in the world's most challenging quandaries through literature is the best piece of instructional advice I could ever offer to a fellow teacher. Personally, my goal is to have each student in my classroom walk away knowing they have the ability to change the world by their knowledge and, more importantly, their willingness to take action. When students are engaged in authentic tasks related to real-world topics, they begin taking the first step into developing their own level of global competence.